The snow hadn't started falling yet, but the sky had that heavy, gray stillness that meant it would before midnight. I pulled up to my parents' house a few minutes after 6, the same two-story colonial I'd walked into every Christmas since I was old enough to carry presents. The porch lights were on, the wreath was hung, and Jingle Bell Rock was leaking faintly through the front windows. It should have felt familiar, comforting even. It didn't. I stepped out of the car, gift bag in hand, and braced myself. The door opened before I knocked. Dad, dressed in the same cable-knit sweater he wore every year, holding a glass of scotch and wearing a tired smile. "Luke," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." I nodded. "Hey, Dad." Inside, everything looked the same. Mom's garland wrapped the banister, candles flickered on every flat surface, and the smell of baked ham clung to the air. But something was different this year. The warmth didn't quite reach the people. Emily was by the fireplace, glass of wine already half gone. Her husband Josh hovering nearby like he might be called to referee at any moment. My cousin Grace offered a quick smile, then looked down at her phone. Uncle Ray, seated in the corner with his usual silent presence, gave a slight nod but didn't stand. No one mentioned the empty seat at the end of the table. No one said her name. Sarah. For the last 7 years, she'd sat beside me at Christmas, helped my mother with the cooking, wore that green wool sweater that made her eyes stand out. This year, she was across town or maybe across the state. I didn't know anymore. And judging by the stiffness in everyone's posture, I wasn't the only one who felt her absence. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom said, too cheerfully, emerging from the kitchen with mashed potatoes and a forced smile. I set my bag by the coat rack, shrugged off my jacket, and joined the quiet procession into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, silver-polished, napkins folded into perfect triangles, 12 place settings, 11 bodies, one missing piece no one wanted to talk about. But we all felt it, and it was only just beginning. My fork scraped against the edge of my plate as I pushed peas into a pile I had no intention of eating. The conversation floated above me. Hollow and disjointed football scores, baking disasters, someone's promotion. Laughter rose and fell like a tide I wasn't part of. I nodded when spoken to, smiled when expected, but mostly kept my eyes on the centerpiece. A plastic sleigh filled with glitter-covered pine cones. Festive. Distracting. It had been 4 months since Sarah left. 13 years together, 7 married. Ended in a single sentence, scribbled on a post-it, and left on the kitchen counter. I can't keep being the only one trying. That was it. No yelling. No threats. Just a quiet goodbye written in black ink and sealed with exhaustion. She moved out the next morning. I watched her go, suitcase in one hand, our dog's leash in the other. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. The family knew, of course. Divorce is a hard thing to hide when your life is suddenly reduced to an empty apartment and a different last name. But no one asked questions. No one pressed for details. Instead, they walked on eggshells around me, like I was a vase someone had already cracked. Everyone except Emily. She'd been watching me all night. Not discreetly. Not kindly. Her gaze burned into the side of my face every time I reached for the salt or poured another glass of wine. She hadn't spoken to me directly since I arrived, but I knew it was coming. That coiled silence she carried like a blade between her teeth ready to cut when the moment was right. Mom passed me the rolls without making eye contact. Dad refilled his scotch twice before dessert. Uncle Ray sat motionless, chewing slowly, eyes flicking between me and Emily like he was measuring pressure points. Josh offered a tired joke about turkey being overrated, and everyone laughed too hard. Everyone but Emily. And me. I chewed, swallowed, nodded along with a story I didn't hear, but inside, something was unraveling. Not anger, not grief, something heavier. The kind of weight you don't feel until it's already settled deep in your chest. I knew I wasn't innocent. But I didn't know I was about to be accused. Not out loud. Not yet. That would come soon enough. It started innocently enough. Grace mentioned her daughter's Christmas recital, how adorable she looked in her little reindeer antlers. That led to a joke from Josh about the horrors of assembling dollhouses at midnight. Then came my mother, gently prodding Emily and Josh with her usual hopeful smile. Any baby news this year? Emily rolled her eyes. Still recovering from the last one, Mom. She raised her wine glass. Besides, I think one toddler with a god complex is enough for now. Laughter followed, mostly polite, and I forced a smile. I reached for the gravy boat, kept my head down, kept chewing. Then Grace, always the bridge builder, turned to me. Luke, did you and Sarah ever talk about kids? She asked. A pause too long. My fork hovered midair. I glanced at Emily. Wrong move. She wanted to, I said finally, setting the fork down. We just weren't in the right place. Emily made a sound. Small, sharp, like a laugh that lost its way. What? I asked. Quieter than I meant to. Her wine glass hit the table harder than necessary. Right place, she repeated, eyes locked on mine. You mean emotionally unavailable and self-absorbed isn't the right place for a child? Josh muttered. No, she said louder now. Let's not pretend he's just some tragic victim here. You're the reason she left, Luke. The words landed like a dropped plate. Sudden. Shattering. The room froze. Dad blinked. Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. Grace stared at her lap. Josh sat back, already regretting not stepping in sooner. Uncle Ray didn't move, just watched me like he had expected it all along. My jaw clenched. I tried to speak, tried to find words to defend myself or explain or deny, but nothing came. My throat tightened. My heart pounded loud enough that I could barely hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Emily leaned forward. She tried. God knows she did. But you shut her out, over and over. And when she finally walked away, you acted like it came out of nowhere. Emily, my mom said sharply. But it was too late. The table had cracked. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was stunned. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than numbness. I felt seen. And it burned. The thing about pain is that it doesn't always show up like you expect. Sometimes it's loud shouting, sobbing, slamming doors. But other times, it creeps in quietly. Like forgetting how to laugh. Like turning your back in bed. Like skipping small kindnesses because you're tired and assuming they'll understand. That's what it was like in the end. Not a scream. A silence. It started after the miscarriage. We had been trying for a year. Sarah charted cycles, read books, whispered hopes into the crook of my neck at night. When the test finally turned positive, she danced barefoot in the kitchen, crying and laughing at the same time. I remember thinking I'd never seen her so alive. 8 weeks later, she was curled on the bathroom floor, bleeding and whispering, "No, no, no," like she could will it back into existence. I held her, but I didn't cry. I didn't cry at the hospital. Didn't cry when we got home. Didn't cry when she packed away the baby books. I went back to work the next day. She stayed in bed. She tried to talk, asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, that we could try again later, that these things happened. I said all the right things, but none of them were real. Not really. The truth was, something cracked inside me that day. Not just from the loss but from the fear that came after. Fear that I wouldn't know how to protect her from hurting like that again. So I pulled back. Bit by bit. I skipped date nights. Stopped leaving notes. Spent more time grading papers. Less time touching her. I thought I was keeping her safe by not needing anything. By being quiet. By disappearing in plain sight. She begged me to come back to her. Not in so many words. In touches. In late-night conversations. I barely answered. In the way her voice would break when she said, It feels like I'm married to a ghost. And still, I did nothing. Until one morning, I woke up and she wasn't there. Just an empty closet, a quiet kitchen, and a yellow post-it that said what she couldn't anymore. I can't keep being the only one trying. And I'd earned every word. The silence stretched, long and uneasy. Emily's words still hung in the air like smoke, curling around the chandelier and choking out any attempt at civility. No one moved. No one dared. I stared at my plate, the remains of green beans and stuffing congealing into a cold mess. My throat was still tight. I hadn't said a word. I wasn't sure I could. Then came the voice. Gravel. Thick. Steady. That's not the whole story, Emily. We all turned. Uncle Ray set his fork down with quiet precision, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and looked directly at my sister. You don't get to rewrite it like that. Pain doesn't wear one face. Emily blinked. Excuse me? Ray leaned forward, elbows on the table. He hadn't spoken more than a few words all night. Hadn't spoken much at any family dinner since I was a kid. But now, he looked different. Not drunk, not cranky. Just certain. You want someone to blame, fine. But don't act like you were inside their marriage. You weren't. None of us were. She told me things. I'm sure she did, he said calmly. And I'm sure Luke made mistakes. Hell, I've made enough to fill a war journal. But people leave. For all kinds of reasons. Sometimes, it's neglect. Sometimes, it's heartbreak. Sometimes, it's because they're trying to outrun their own shadow. And sometimes, it's all of the above. Emily narrowed her eyes. Why are you even talking? Ray didn't flinch. Because I've watched this family turn silence into a religion. Because I've sat through 20 Christmases while everyone pretended things were fine when they weren't. And because for once, I'm not going to sit here and let someone bleed out while the rest of us pass the cranberry sauce. No one breathed. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted a napkin. Dad looked down at his scotch like he'd rather be in it. Grace was wide-eyed. Josh stared at his plate. And me? I looked at Ray. Really looked at him. This man who'd spent years on the fringe of every family photo, who never joined group prayers, who always left early. And now, here he was, stepping into the fire without flinching, defending me. And somehow, that meant more than I could say. Emily stood up so fast her chair scraped against the hardwood, loud and grating. So, that's what this is? She snapped. Old men sticking up for each other? Another emotionally unavailable man defending his little protégé? Ray didn't blink. No. This is me saying maybe don't crucify your brother at dinner like you're hosting some kind of damn morality play. Josh reached for Emily's arm. Babe, let's just sit. Don't! She cut in, shaking him off. Everyone's been tiptoeing around Luke for months. But the truth is, he let his marriage fall apart because he couldn't be bothered to show up emotionally. And now we're all supposed to act like he's some wounded hero? My father slammed his hand down on the table. Enough! It wasn't a shout, but it stopped everyone cold. He rarely raised his voice. This wasn't volume, it was finality. This is Christmas, he said slowly, voice tight. This is not the time or place. Emily's mouth opened, then shut again. Her chest heaved with the kind of anger that didn't have anywhere to land. I stood up. It's okay. No, Dad said, looking at me now. It's not. But we're not doing this here. I nodded once, then looked around the table. My mother couldn't meet my eyes. Grace looked like she wanted to cry. Josh looked like he regretted everything. Ray, bless him, just watched me with a quiet kind of solidarity. I'm going to step out for a bit, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. No one stopped me. No one said a word. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door and stepped outside into the cold. The snow had started falling in slow, lazy flakes, swirling under the glow of the porch light. I walked down the steps and into the yard, boots crunching against the fresh layer of white. The silence out here was cleaner than the one inside. I stood in it, breathing, watching my breath curl in the air like ghosts escaping my lungs. My hands stayed in my pockets. My eyes stayed on the trees across the road. Somewhere inside, they'd moved on to dessert. Out here, I could finally breathe. The door creaked open behind me, slow and deliberate. I didn't turn around right away. I knew who it was. Ray always walked like he was trying not to bother the floor. "You left before pie," he said. I let out a breath, a puff of fog in the air. Didn't feel like celebrating. Ray stepped up beside me, hands in the pockets of his worn flannel jacket. "Mind if I smoke?" "I don't." He didn't light one, just stood there, holding the unlit cigarette between two fingers like a prop, like something to do with his hands. After a moment, he nodded toward the side of the house. "Come on. Garage is warmer." We walked in silence, boots crunching against snow and gravel. Inside, the garage was dim, cluttered, familiar. Tools on the pegboard, old paint cans in the corner. The heater rattled faintly from above the workbench. Ray flipped the switch, casting everything in soft yellow light. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "You know, everyone thinks I stayed single because I liked the freedom. Truth is, I just never got over her." I looked at him. He wasn't smiling. "Her name was June," he said. "Met her in '73. She was kind, smelled like vanilla, laughed with her whole face." He paused. "I was back from Vietnam, trying to be normal again. I thought if I kept my head down and didn't ask for too much, maybe things would work out." "What happened?" "I never told her what she meant to me. Not really. Kept it locked up. Didn't want to scare her off. Didn't want to seem weak." He stared at the floor. "She left one day. Said I didn't feel like someone who wanted a future. Just a placeholder until the next deployment." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Ray looked up at me, eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them. "You think silence protects people, but it doesn't. It just lets them drift further until they're gone." I swallowed hard. "You still love her?" I nodded. He tossed the cigarette onto the workbench. "Then don't lie to yourself about what went wrong. And don't lie to the people who care. If you're ready to be honest," he said, "you should be honest with everyone, looting yourself." Back inside my childhood bedroom, the same peeling posters, the same scuff on the dresser from when I broke the lamp. I lay on the old twin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The house had gone quiet. Dishes were probably being washed, the TV humming in the background, but all I could hear was Ray's voice echoing inside me. "Be honest." I closed my eyes and saw her again. Sarah, standing in our kitchen with flour on her nose, holding a recipe book, and asking if we could cook something together for once. I told her I was grading essays. She cooked alone. Sarah curled up next to me in bed one night, whispering that she felt like we were strangers in the same house. I kissed her forehead and said, "You're just tired." She turned away. Sarah, holding my hand after the miscarriage, telling me she needed me to talk to her. Not to fix anything, just to talk. I said, "There's nothing to say." But there was. I just didn't know how to say it. There were so many moments like that. Missed connections. Words unspoken. Doors I could have walked through but didn't. She was reaching for me again and again, and each time, I found a reason to stay just out of reach. Work, stress, fatigue, grief. I wore them like armor and called it coping. But the truth? The truth was, I was afraid. Afraid that if I cracked open, even a little, everything would spill out, and she'd see how much of a mess I really was. I thought holding it all in made me strong. Made me a man. What it really made me was alone. I remembered the day she left, how she'd lingered in the doorway. She looked at me like she wanted me to stop her, to say something, anything. But I just stood there, frozen, watching her walk away like it was happening on TV, like it wasn't my life unraveling. And I'd told myself she gave up too soon. But now, lying here in the dark with the echoes of a ruined marriage curling around me like smoke. I knew better. She didn't give up. She just got tired of trying alone. Inside the kitchen, the clatter of dishes had quieted. Emily stood at the sink, staring out the window into the falling snow, wine glass gripped in one hand. Her mother wiped the same section of the counter for the third time, unsure whether to say something or just let the moment pass like they always did. I shouldn't have said it like that, Emily muttered finally. Then why did you? Her mother asked gently. Emily turned around. Her voice was low but steady. Because no one else was going to. Everyone's treating Luke like he's broken. But Sarah didn't leave because he was broken. She left because he was absent. Sweetheart? No. Emily interrupted. You didn't see her, Mom. I did. She came to my house 2 days before she left. Sat on my couch and cried for an hour. Said she felt like she was married to a man made of smoke. That every time she reached for him, he disappeared. Her mother set the rag down, eyes wet. She tried. Emily continued. God. She tried. After the miscarriage, she begged him to talk, to grieve with her, to just be there. And he wouldn't. Not couldn't, wouldn't. He shut down, like he was the only one who lost something. Like she didn't lose it too. Her voice cracked then. And she took another sip of wine to steady it. She asked me once, Emily whispered, if he ever really saw her. Not just the good parts. The real, hurting parts. And I didn't know what to say, because I didn't think he did. Her mother stepped forward, reached for her hand. But Emily pulled away gently. I'm not trying to hurt him, she said. But I won't pretend he was innocent. He abandoned her in their grief. And then he stood in the ruins and acted surprised that she walked away. Her mother didn't speak, just stood there. The weight of it all, pressing down on both of them. He wasn't a monster, Emily said. But he made her feel invisible. And sometimes, that's worse. When I stepped back inside, the warmth of the house hit like a wave. I peeled off my coat slowly, the snow still melting on my shoulders. The murmur of voices from the kitchen carried into the hallway. I followed them. Emily turned as I entered, wineglass still in hand. Her expression didn't change. Neither did mine. Can we talk? I asked. Mom nodded and left the room without a word. Emily stayed where she was, arms crossed, back against the counter, like she was bracing for a second round. I heard what you said, I began. Out there, at the table, and I know it came from a place of anger, but you weren't wrong. Her brows knit. She hadn't expected that. I failed Sarah, I said. Not just at the end. Long before that. I shut down when she needed me. I disappeared when she was still fighting for us. And I didn't even realize how much until it was already over. She said nothing, but her posture softened, arms loosening, eyes shifting. I didn't come in here to defend myself. I came in here to say you're right. I was the ghost in the room, the one she tried to reach through, and I hated hearing it tonight. But I needed to. Emily looked down at the floor. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Not even to me. I was ashamed, I admitted. Still am some days. It's easier to let people pity you than to admit you're the reason someone left. She exhaled slowly. The tension in her face eased, but the edge didn't vanish completely. She loved you, you know. Right up until she couldn't anymore. I know, I said quietly. And I'm trying to be the kind of man who would have deserved that. Emily looked up at me finally. Her eyes weren't as hard now. Just tired. I shouldn't have said it like I did. It needed to be said, I replied. She nodded once, a small truce hanging in the space between us. We didn't hug. We weren't that kind of family. But for the first time in a long time, we understood each other. And maybe that was enough. Later that night, after the dishes had been washed, the leftovers packed, and the rest of the family had scattered to their rooms or couches, I found Emily in the den. She sat curled in an armchair, scrolling her phone, a blanket draped over her legs. She didn't look up when I walked in, but I knew she knew I was there. I held the envelope in my hand, the weight of it heavier than paper should be. I'd rewritten the letter at least 10 times over the past few weeks, starting over, scratching out lines, trying to find the right words after years of never saying them at all. The final version was handwritten. 8 pages. No edits. Just the truth. "I've been writing something," I said quietly. "To Sarah." Emily looked up, skeptical, but curious. "I don't expect anything from her," I continued. "Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. I just needed her to know everything I didn't say when I should have." She didn't speak, but her gaze held steady. I told her how much I regret shutting her out, how sorry I am for letting fear become a wall. I wrote about the miscarriage, about how I thought silence would protect us, but all it did was bury us. I wrote about how she deserved more, better, and how I know that now. I held the letter out to her. "If you still talk to her, would you give her this?" She stared at it for a long moment, then reached out and took it without a word. Tucked it gently into her bag, like it was something fragile. "She's in Baltimore now," she said finally. "Working at a clinic. Rents a place near the harbor." I nodded. "She'll read it," Emily added, voice softer now. "She might not answer, but she'll read it." "That's enough," I said. "It has to be." We sat in the quiet for a few minutes. The fire had gone out, and the only sound was the soft hum of the heater. Some truths arrive too late to change the past, but sometimes just speaking them out loud is its own kind of beginning. I found my mother in the kitchen, standing barefoot by the sink, sipping from a chipped mug she'd had since I was in middle school. The Christmas tree lights blinked in the next room, casting soft shadows across the linoleum. She didn't jump when I walked in, just looked at me like she'd been expecting it. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Didn't try." She pulled another mug from the cabinet, poured coffee. No cream, no sugar. She handed it to me wordlessly and sat at the table. I joined her. After a minute, she said, "I always worried you'd turn out like your father." I blinked. "What?" "Not in the bad ways," she said quickly. "He's a good man, provided, stayed faithful. But your father, he keeps things in, always has. Carries his pain like luggage he refuses to unpack. And I see that in you." I stared into my coffee. "I didn't mean to be that way." "I know," she said softly. "But meaning to and doing are different things." I nodded. The letter to Sarah felt like it weighed 100 pounds in Emily's bag. "She loved you," Mom continued. "And I saw how much you loved her too. But love needs air, Luke. It needs light. You buried yours too deep." I didn't argue. Couldn't. "But," she said, reaching across the table to lay her hand over mine, "I also saw you tonight. With Emily. With Ray. You're trying." I swallowed hard. "It's probably too late." "Maybe," she said. "But you still try. Even if she never answers. Even if nothing changes. You try because that's how you grow. And because one day you'll meet someone else who'll need all the parts of you you've spent a lifetime hiding." I looked at her. This woman who had carried so much without complaint, who had watched her son retreat into himself and never said a word. "Thank you," I said. She squeezed my hand once, then stood and kissed the top of my head. "Good men aren't perfect," she whispered, "but they try, and I think you're starting to." As she walked away, I stared out the window into the dark. Snow still fell, soft and steady. Maybe tomorrow, I'd try again. The envelope came on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked between a credit card offer and a heating bill. No return address. Just my name, written in Sarah's looping handwriting across the front. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, hands trembling in a way I didn't expect. I already knew she'd read the letter Emily had texted me 2 days earlier with a simple, "She got it." But this This was more than I'd hoped for. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No salutation, no sign-off. Just her voice, steady and clear, in a few measured lines. I read your letter twice. Once through tears. Once with a pen in hand. Underlining parts I needed to remember. Thank you for saying what you couldn't before. I needed that more than I realized. I want you to know I found peace not in forgetting you, but in forgiving you. And in forgiving myself for staying as long as I did, hoping you'd wake up. I see now that you are. Maybe not for me, but for yourself. And that matters. Be well, Luke. I read it again, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer where I kept old photos and half-filled notebooks and the ring box I still hadn't thrown away. There were no promises in her letter. No door left ajar. But there was something else. A kind of quiet respect. A nod from someone who had seen you at your worst and still believed you were capable of more. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just sat on the edge of the bed, breathed in, breathed out, and for the first time since she left, felt the ground steady beneath me. Not because she was coming back, but because I finally understood why she had to go, and why I didn't want to stay the same man she left behind. 2 weeks after Christmas, I sat in a therapist's office, trying to describe a lifetime of silence in under 50 minutes. Her name was Dr. Mercer, mid-40s, wore chunky earrings and didn't interrupt. I liked her immediately. I told her about the miscarriage, about Sarah, about how my childhood taught me that emotions were private, like passwords. That vulnerability meant risk, that shutting down felt safer than breaking open. She nodded, took notes, sometimes offered quiet reflections. Never judgment, just space. I didn't say everything in the first session, but I said enough. The following week, I joined a local writing group. Nothing fancy, just 7 strangers in a church basement every Thursday night, scribbling stories about love and loss and everything in between. I didn't share mine at first. Then one night, I read aloud a short piece about 2 people who spoke different emotional languages and stopped trying to translate. No one clapped, but someone in the back nodded and whispered, "Yeah." That was enough. At school, I started staying after hours, helping students who didn't quite fit quiet kids with too much on their minds and not enough words to say it. I started holding one-on-one sessions, listening more than talking. I told one student, a boy named Evan, "Sometimes writing is where you say the stuff you can't out loud." He looked at me like he'd just been handed a flashlight in the dark. Then one afternoon, I got a voicemail from Uncle Ray. Storytelling night. Vets and civilians. Next Friday. I told him, "You've got something to say. Don't make me a liar." I almost deleted it. Then I played it again. And again. Next Friday, I stood in a circle of folding chairs in a quiet community center. Ray sat near the back, arms crossed, nodding like this was all perfectly normal. I read a story I'd written called "The Ghost at the Dinner Table." It wasn't about Sarah. Not directly. It was about silence. And snow. And the cost of not saying the things that matter until it's too late. Afterward, someone asked if it was true. I just said, "It is now." The snow had started falling early that morning. Light at first, then steady, covering the sidewalk, the driveway, the cracks in the pavement, like time had gently erased a year's worth of wear. I pulled up to the house just before 5, headlights cutting across the white blanketed lawn. Same 2-story colonial, same porch lights glowing, same wreath on the door. But it felt different this time. Or maybe I did. Inside, the air was warm and familiar. Laughter drifted from the living room, where Grace's kids were tangled in wrapping paper and sugar. Josh was fiddling with the stereo. Uncle Ray was in his usual chair by the fireplace, sipping eggnog and smirking like he knew something the rest of us didn't. I hung my coat and stepped into the dining room. The table was set with the same good china, napkins folded into triangles again. But this year, every seat was full. No empty place to remind us of who was missing, just room for who had shown up. Emily came in from the kitchen carrying a pie. She caught my eye, hesitated a second, then walked over. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She set the pie down and cleared her throat. "I just wanted to say, thanks. For last year. For not shutting down. For owning it." I nodded. "I meant it." "I know," she said. Then quieter, "We're all better for it." We weren't hugging people. Still weren't. But her hand brushed mine as she passed by, and it was enough. After dinner, while the kids unwrapped puzzles and Ray told a story about setting a Humvee on fire, by accident, Mom handed me a small envelope. "This came for you this morning," she said. Forwarded from the school. It was cream-colored. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. Sarah's. Inside was a card. No elaborate design. No photograph. Just a white background and 5 handwritten words in soft blue ink. "I'm glad you found your words." No punctuation. No signature. Just that. I folded it carefully and slid it into my jacket pocket. I didn't need more. Outside, the snow kept falling quiet, steady, softening the edges of everything. I sat beside Ray near the fire, letting the heat sink in, listening to the buzz of contentment all around me. 1 year ago, I'd left this house carrying 1,000 pounds of silence. Tonight, I left nothing unsaid. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.